الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. So what you heard there is the Islamic call to prayer. I showed you the words from a website that is chanted 5 times daily for the 5 times that Muslims were commanded to pray by Muhammad. If you look at this map, you can see essentially the map of the Middle East, the time of Muhammad. Notice, importantly, Arabia here. See where Mecca is, where Medina, which was originally called Yathrib, right there. And this area here along the coast of the Red Sea is known as the Hejaz. All right? So it's important to get your bearings here. Notice where Jerusalem, Damascus. Now in our class here, we've talked about all these places already. We've talked about the Byzantine Empire up here, right? That's on this test coming up. This Persian Empire was not the same as the ancient Persian Empire, but it's the same area. It's some of the descendants of the earlier Persians. So at the time of Muhammad, you had 2 great powers north of Arabia, the Persians over here, and the Byzantines controlled this area here, okay? There were trade routes that came through these areas. One of the problems that was going on with these two were fighting each other over the Fertile Crescent area, as we've seen, and over Syria. They were fighting each other over this area, or in this area. Well, go figure, people fighting in the Middle East. So with the rise of Muhammad's movement will come out of this area, and the Arab conquest will take place after the death of Muhammad, but we'll be talking about that later. So let's talk a little bit about the pre-Islamic Middle East. Now you have all these notes online. There's a document that you should get, you should look at. So make sure you get that document. It's just a Word document with all these notes. So I'm going to go pretty fast here in some of this part. What did the Middle East look like before? As I told you, on one side you had the Byzantine Empire. You should know what that was. We've talked about it already. And I just kind of give you modern territorial names so you give an idea of where they were. Most Byzantine people were Orthodox Christian, an officially Orthodox Christian empire. There were Jewish communities and other Christian groups. Persian Empire, remember we talked about Zoroastrian religion? That was the majority in the Persian Empire, and these other different groups too. So what about Arabs? As I showed you, the Arabs lived in the Peninsula, Arabia, right? There were trade cities in many areas. There was huge desert areas too. A number of oases, right, in these throughout the desert areas. That coastal plain along the Red Sea was known as the Hejaz. Now, the Arab society, like many societies in human history, were tribal. The tribe you belong to was very important. Tribes are the largest group, and then you have clans, and then you have extended families, and then families, okay? So tribes were very important. And the tribes did have inner warfare between each other. They raided each other. This happened quite a bit. You might have heard of the Bedouin before. The Bedouin, there are still Bedouin in Arab society and in the Middle East. They are nomadic herders. They go around herding animals. They're main part of Arab society. There were also kingdoms in the south, in the area of what we would call Yemen today, which is basically the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. There were kingdoms in northern Arabia, south of what would be southern Iraq, what would be southern Israel, Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia today. Mecca became, it seems anyway, this is what many people say, a center of trade, and Arabia as a whole became a center of trade, and Mecca became a trading center. One reason being, as I said, that the Persians and the Byzantines were fighting each other quite a bit, and so trade routes kind of got pushed south, so they wouldn't you wouldn't have to go through these war zones. Arab religion before Muhammad was like many other religions we've talked about. They were polytheistic. They had many gods. There were tribal gods. Some Arabs practice animism. Animism is the belief that there's spirits in objects, in natural objects. So trees have spirits, rocks have spirits, etc. You might have heard of genies before, right? Well, the jinn originally was not a it's not a guy coming out of a lamp that was going to give you wishes. A jinn was more of a demonic type creature. And in fact, the Arabs still use that term when they speak of jinn. It means something more like demons in the way Christians talk about it too. A kahin, a soothsayer. Soothsayer is a person who can manipulate the spiritual forces for your advantage. They know the right spells or prayers and so forth, okay? Harems were originally not a collection of women, but were actually places, a sacred enclosure for the gods. So again, they would have what Muhammad would later call idols, so statues, images, and so forth, where people would worship the various gods, just like people did in other places we've already talked about. In the south, you had cities with temples that were built. There were established priesthoods to the various gods. Again, not unlike other places we've already seen. Now, something very important existed in Mecca, and that object was known as the Kaaba. The Kaaba was in Mecca, and it seems that Mecca was a center of religious pilgrimages of all these various gods. The Kaaba most likely is a meteorite. I've seen different theories about it. It's a black rock, and it was covered by a shrine, and it still is today under Islam. We'll talk more about what that was, but people would go there to worship various gods. Okay, who was the prophet? The prophet here, when I say the prophet, I mean Muhammad, okay? So Muhammad was, and I'm really giving you kind of the basic narrative here. There's actually a bit of a debate about some of these things that I really don't want to go into, but I could send you some links on different videos about those debates. I'm giving you kind of the basic accepted narrative about who Muhammad was, okay? Just so you understand. Muhammad was probably born around 570. He was born in Mecca. So he was part of this larger Quraysh tribe. The clan is the smaller group within the tribe, see? And then you have families below clans. He was an orphan. Both of his parents died when he was quite young, and his uncle, a man named Abu Talib, took care of him. So that was his guardian, his parent, whatever. In his early 20s, Muhammad married his first wife. Her name was Khadijah. But Khadijah was quite a bit older than him. I want to say like 15 years. I'd have to look it up to know exactly, but somewhere around there. She's generally pictured or imagined to be a very wealthy widow woman, and Muhammad married her and took over the family business. Okay, so he's this merchant, traveling merchant, and he had contact with different groups along the Hijaz. The pivotal event in Muhammad's life, at least according to the Muslim tradition, is this event known as the Night of Power. That's what's depicted in that picture over there. Muhammad is the person kneeling, whose face is covered white, and the angel Gabriel, this is according to Muslim tradition again, okay? So you had, again, as I was saying, Muhammad married Khadijah in his early 20s. She was she was older than him, a wealthy widow. He's this traveling merchant. In 610, this event known as the Night of Power takes place, where, according to Muslim tradition, Gabriel appears to Muhammad and begins giving him these revelations. At first, he didn't know it was the angel Gabriel, again, according to Muslim tradition, but later that's what he said. And it's important because this is his big moment. This is when he really begins to receive his revelation and know his message. All right? This is how he becomes the prophet. And we're going to talk about what he preaches in a second. His first converts. His first convert was his wife, Khadijah. So Khadijah is a very well-respected woman in Islamic tradition. Khadijah is seen as the first Muslim convert according to the Prophet's teaching. Second convert was a man named Ali. Ali is Muhammad's cousin. And Ali will be very close to Muhammad, and this is why the names Muhammad and Ali are two of the most common names, or a combination of the two, in among Muslim men. Okay? And his third convert, early convert anyway, was a man named Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr will be a very close confidant of Muhammad and be his first successor. And we'll talk about what that means in the future. So what was Muhammad's message? Muhammad's basic message, I just kind of lay it out here for you. 1, there is only one God. Allah is the true God. So he says all these other gods you worship are not God. Okay? Allah is the true God and the only God, and he's the creator of everything. Muhammad says there will be a judgment day of sins and good deeds. That every person will be raised from the dead. So Muhammad believes, like Christians, that there will be a bodily resurrection of the dead. Okay? And they will be judged. And that every person will then spend eternity after the bodily resurrection in paradise with God, or in hell, or eternal condemnation. Okay? A little thing about these words. The word Islam derives from the word that literally means submission. Okay? So Islam means submission to the will of God. When I say God here, I'm meaning the Muslim conception of God, of course, Allah. So a Muslim is one who has submitted to the will of God. Right? So, and Muhammad explicitly says that he's the last prophet, meaning his message is the fulfillment of God's will, and I don't want to say trumps others' messages. Every other group before him should be interpreted through him. That might be a way to say it. But from the Muslim perspective, all good Jews, all believing Jews, and all good and believing Christians were actually Muslims. Okay? And what they say is that the later Jews and Christians that came along, and yes, that's an abbreviation for Christians, the later Jews and Christians that came along actually corrupted the truth. So that's an important thing to remember. That it is Muhammad's message that is the truth. And that Jews of his own time and Christians of his own time did not have the pure message, according to Muhammad, of the will of God. And that's going to be his main argument.